If they lose this game, I think it's one of those cases where you had such high goals at the beginning of the year, and now you're 1-2. Would not shock me to see them completely spin out of control and finish 7-5 or 8-4. I think he could potentially lose his team if they lose this game to Ohio State.
It's fair to say the leadership, isn't close to what it was a year ago, and that's on me.
We're not playing well as a team. We didn't stop the run worth of shit the other day, so there ain't nobody, we got to get a whole lot better in a lot of ways. It ain't just the DBs or the corners, that's not how we look at it. We are not playing well as a group.
Talent is there, offensively, defensively, on both sides of the ball. The talent is there. It's really just about us executing and basically doing what we were capable of doing.
And that's my fault. We don't have a guy that we can play big. We needed to play big the other day, and we didn't. And that's not their fault. That's our fault.
No one's getting down. Everyone's still believing, and that's what we got to basically go on right now. We've lost 2 games, and all we can do is basically bounce back. That I think that's been the biggest thing. I think everyone's kind of bought in, and everyone's working even harder.
It's the Unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Carey Murdock and Josh McCuistion. Eddie Shradovsevich.
All right, welcome everybody. It is time for another Unofficial 40. It seems like it's been quite some time since we have been back in here. Eddie, what are you showing me?
Josh can't hear us.
He can now.
Oh.
I don't know what happened there. I heard no intro.
It was a good one.
Here's the thing. Okay, podcast started. Off to a rough start, kind of like OU.
No, we're off to a better start than OU.
Here's what's going to happen. The intro, I'm going to redo it anyway. So the magic of post-production. Because I'm trying to, here's the thing. If you can see my screen, I have 3 things up at once. You have to switch between 2 things to both play music and files, and I haven't mastered it yet. Not to mention all the knobs and the buttons. Josh can't hear me. But anyway, welcome back. It is the Unofficial 40. I was thinking about this the other day, until we actually sell some sponsorships, should we just promote a charity at the beginning of the podcast? Tell people I don't know, you into lab rescues or
I don't know.
Something like that?
I've always been anti-charity.
Here we go. Starting off with the fire.
I think that's a great idea, Carey. And I think it's okay. I think it also, Eddie hating it also is okay. I think we can do both.
I think we should start a charity to get Joe to practice on time. That's what I think.
I don't know if that's possible.
A clock charity?
Yeah, like an alarm, special alarm. Joe got to practice yesterday when it ended yesterday.
Well, I got
done.
I got there at 5:50. And that's when they're supposed to bring people out. And I know I need to get there earlier, but I was doing some work around the house and finished up the
I got in Norman at 4:45 yesterday.
Well,
Eddie's a model employee, Joe.
I got there at 5:15 last week, or was that 2 weeks ago? And I walked into that, the old cafeteria where we meet them, and I was by myself. And I realized quickly I'd done something wrong, I guess, because 5:30, 5:45 started to roll around, and nobody was coming in. And I think I snuck in earlier than I should have.
It's not rocket science. Just
Joe,
say
the only
yes
thing
and
I'll
move
say
on.
is when Carey can give you punctuality grief, there's probably something.
Oh, yeah. Wait a second. I think somebody in this room showed up to the Bob Stoops presser after it had started with mud tracks all over the back of his T-shirt.
Yeah, it's called when you wake up at 4:30 in the morning and you go do an entirely different job, and then you rush home to do Bob Stoops teleconference for the board. And then you got to jump in the shower and get over there. I'm not taking any crap from anybody. I worked my ass off.
What is happening
You work
here?
what?
I work my ass off.
What? Are we going to do the feats of strength next?
We're
doing the airing of grievances.
Wow. Okay. Payday's coming up soon. We're getting into a bad situation just in the inner office politics now. I guess this team is ripping us all apart because we had a chance to talk to now the offense and the defense. We're recording this on a Thursday, and had a chance to talk to Lincoln Riley, to Mike Stoops, Baker Mayfield. My favorite guy to talk to yesterday was actually Stephen Parker. And, we have this deal going on. You guys were at the press conference. Bob is now limiting media, limiting who can talk to the media because of what we talked about last week, the Austin Kendall stuff, shooting his mouth off.
The post-Austin Kendall world that we live in.
Which Josh seemed to have some problems with the questions. Like, I don't know, Josh, was your biggest question, why are you punishing us? Or your biggest problem?
Yeah, I didn't understand. Like, I get from I don't even get it. I was going to say I get it from a media perspective. Bob's not doing that to punish anybody. Like, I don't like it. It's not good for us. It's not good for our business. But it doesn't change that, like, I can understand where he's coming from and not like it. But at the same time, recognize that it's not a punishment of us. It's him trying to keep everything in line and keep everything as he feels like it should be and put guys that he knows are going to say nothing. And that, like I said, that sucks for us. But his job is not to accommodate us. That's not the world he lives in. So this, like, it just felt like such a sob story. It's like, why are you punishing us? Like, what? Like, what? I thought Bob took that way better than he could have. Like, I wouldn't have blamed him at all if he would have just been, like thrown the mic and walked out.
I think the main thing is, and Eddie could talk to this, I mean, when you're on the beat, you're getting... You just want someone that you can talk to, and sometimes you want to be able to tell different stories, especially during a bye week. It'd be great to talk to A.D. Miller, about the catches he came through with against Ohio State and kind of what that means for his development going forward. It'd be great to talk to Emmanuel Beal, after kind of it seems like he and Tay Evans are starting to now, in the middle of games, compete for that job at linebacker. But those are things you can't do. And I'll just say, I mean, it's bullshit. It's bullshit that, that OU caused this.
That's
that the media
problem.
pays.
That's the problem. Is it wasn't somebody on the beat that released this.
No, it's not one of us.
It was OU, and not only did they release it, they had 48 hours. They sat on the video, didn't look at it, and then let it go public. That's somebody.
It's already a group of people that get more access than we do just because they're the university, which that's going to happen. I am fine. I've come to terms. I'm not going to sit on the board bitching anymore about lack of access because people get so mad at me, and I realize you don't care. If you're reading or listening, you don't care about what we're going through in terms of trying to bring you more information. Now you demand it regardless of whether we have access. You want your scrimmage report, even though we can't be out there, which is bullshit. I mean, I'm just the cusser today. That's fine. Mike Stoops has inspired me. So, you get sick of it, but I kind of raise my hands, and I don't feel like I'm being punished, Josh, so I agree with you a little bit. But it's crap. I mean, it's crap. We didn't cause this thing, yet it's affecting us and our ability to, really do. I don't think it's affecting our job to do a good job because we got to roll with the punches. I've been an internet guy my entire life. I've always rolled with the punches. I have no problem with that.
Don't misunderstand. Like, it's not me. I don't have a problem with the sentiment. It was the way it was presented. Like, as if this, like, Bob's choice had nothing to do with the media. It wasn't the media screwed me here. It was a dumb, what did Lincoln Riley call him? A young, immature or young something freshman.
He liked his confidence, he said.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it wasn't that. Like, it like I said, my problem was the presentation, not the sentiment. Because don't get me wrong, guys, I love reading when you guys can tell a unique angle or write some story that maybe not everybody has talked about ad nauseum. So it's nice to read that stuff. But at the same time, like, Bob's choice had nothing to do with punishment of the media or having any beef.
But here's the thing,
anybody,
Josh. Here's the thing.
Here's
the thing. Bob Stoops has to operate. He has to coach a football team, and he has to do all the recruiting. He has to do all the media. He has to manage all of this stuff. He failed at media last week. I mean, you could argue he'd been failing at recruiting for a while, and they're doing better there now. He failed on the football field. He failed to get his team ready. It's just one of those things. It's like, I don't know. It's part of your job at every college across the country. Every coach. I'm not doing he makes $6 million. He should be, able to do this or that. That's just part of his job. And too often, Bob over the years he's done this, so it doesn't surprise me. I knew it was going to happen as soon as you heard the comments come out, because he's done. I mean, Travis Lewis, after they lost to Texas Tech on that night where they had the rain delay, he shot his mouth off. And then we only had 4 players the rest of the year until, that was 2011 when they started the season #1 and had a disappointing season, right? I mean, that was when they lost to Tech that year, right?
Yeah, it seems like this happens once every 3-4 years. Somebody, they go out, embarrass themselves, embarrass the alumni, and then they
embarrass Eddie Radosevich.
Well, it was embarrassing. We'll get into that. But then he comes back, he lays a hammer down, and then all of a sudden we're sitting there with nobody to interview on Monday and Tuesday. And
here's how it worked out yesterday. Like Joe, he was late, but there were supposed to be more people coming. Like yesterday, we talked to Mike Stoops. They brought Jordan Evans in, and they brought in Stephen Parker. They were supposed to bring Charles Walker and Ahmad Thomas, but we were sitting there waiting, and then Mike Houck came in. He said, "Sorry, guys." He was really sorry. He said, "I have to apologize, but Charles Walker got scratched from the list." That was what he said. I guess Bob said, no, he's not interviewing, and then they couldn't ever. I guess Ahmad Thomas escaped custody, and nobody could find him.
He had daddy duty.
So we got two interviews with players and 1 coach yesterday.
Correct.
Couldn't they give you guys some more like position coaches? Has that come up?
Oh
with
God,
anything?
no.
Bob cut that off. Like he just announced one day, like you can't talk to
assistants at the University of Oklahoma.
We only get coordinators.
And I know that, but like I thought maybe with this ruling, do they think of the assistants as the same as a young player? Like I never understood that. Was there something that led to that I missed?
Bob hates it. It's just like Saban. He wants to control the message. He only wants so many people speaking. Because let's face it, he's already got his hands full with Mike saying stuff that he really wouldn't say. Like, stuff like, I guess I should just go ahead and play it. Since I've already been the cusser today, let's bring in our other cusser, Mike Stoops.
There's nobody, what I mean? We're not playing well as a team. We didn't stop the run worth of shit the other day, so there ain't nobody, we got to get a whole lot better in a lot of ways. It ain't just the DBs or the corners, or that's not how we look at it. We are not playing well as a group. We're not getting enough turnovers. There's a lot of things we could do better. We didn't stop the run. We were out of our gaps. Shouldn't have been able to run the ball like that on us, but, they did. So, there's a lot of areas we need to improve on.
So media sucked yesterday, except for the fact that Mike Stoops dropped an S-bomb, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was like, we'll trade 3 player interviews for every cuss word that Mike Stoops says.
Yeah.
Because it's awesome.
If Bob has never publicly cussed that I can ever remember.
Yeah, I can't ever remember a time that he did. That would maybe if they start 1-4, he'll just start cussing all the time.
Well, the thing, what could it hurt? I mean, he said it himself that the Austin Kendall quote didn't affect his play at all, that his team's play at all. I mean, cussing's not going to affect his team's play at all. He's not going to get mad at Mike for saying shit. So I don't understand why he's going to drop the hammer on all these guys talking if it doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, and if Mike can cuss, if all this stuff doesn't matter, then why is this where he's putting his foot down? Why is this where the guy whose program just started 1-2, this is where he's drawn the line? It just seems like a weird, arbitrary place for him to start being angry.
Well, I think he's been angry for the last 3 weeks, really, since the season started.
But what drastic changes have really been made? I mean, there's nothing that seems to be the continuing to do a lot of the same things on the field, but then the stark changes come off the field.
That's the way it's worked for the last 19 years or 18 years.
I don't see how that changes the results on the field. That's all I'm saying.
Well, look, I want to get back into the team stuff, but Josh, let's hit on some recruiting, and obviously a huge weekend. I know a lot of people talking about Marvin Wilson and how this affected him, but overall, Josh, just the weekend, getting to talk to some guys, what's been the overall feel from guys that were on campus?
I think for me it'd be surprising. Like I really kind of went into Sunday morning when I started making phone calls expecting to hear guys, it was this or it was that, and they'd talk about the game. the only time the game came up is if I had to ask about it. Like that's not true. There was a couple of guys that would say something exactly along those lines. Yeah, it was a pretty cool visit. I had a good time, but the game, they kind of got dominated, or the game, along those lines, that came up a couple of times. But for the most part, especially, you start with the commitments. Those guys all seemed locked in. The one guy that we kept hearing stuff about was Jalen Reagor, and he was the most unanimous of all of them and was like, I'm 100% Sooner. Like, he didn't leave anything to question or doubt. He seemed really tied into it. And that was, like I said, that was pretty unanimous for the commitments. The uncommitted guys, like you said, Marvin and Jeff Okudah, I said it last week. If OU lost that game, I didn't see any way they got Okudah. I haven't heard anything to change my take on that. With Marvin, I don't think the visit went as well as he had hoped it would. And I don't know that was just about the game. I don't really know what kind of changed there, but it just didn't feel like the visit hit all the spots he was hoping. I certainly don't think OU's out, but I think they've got some ground to make up now. But to the positive stuff, Jakir Daly seemed to love the visit. From people I've talked to, they feel very good about where Oklahoma is. Adrian Ely, I always felt like that was a guy that was a heavy OU lean, and I still think that's the case. I'm actually going to go see him tomorrow night and ask him some questions, talk with him afterward, so we'll know more then. But I think Oklahoma's in a great spot. And finally, the one that surprises me is Greg Rogers, the defensive tackle from Las Vegas. People I've talked to told me he was blown away by his visit. He loved his time at OU, and I think you've always kind of been expecting it to be USC or UCLA. With what's happening at USC, I think that's opening a door for Oklahoma, and they may be starting to walk through it.
Apparently, it was the Wonder Boy that did it. The Captain Crunch covered corn dog at Diamond Dogs. He was tweeting about
I saw you said something about that on Twitter. That not only does that sound disgusting, but
people say it's awesome.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Preach, Eddie. That sounds awful.
Diamond Dogs, though, I will give them a shout out though. Good food, real good food. I like it.
Like I didn't oversell it, just good food.
Now, Joe,
it's great food.
Joe, I know. Did you had a chance at all to catch up with any of the guys that you were tracking?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing was Texas commit Kobe Boyce coming on the visit, and from talking to him, it sounds like the trip couldn't have gone any better. He came in, he left still a Texas commit, but I think Oklahoma's put themselves in a position where they could get a flip there down the road. I think he really loved his visit at OU. He hung out with a lot of Sooner Squad 17 guys, Robert Barnes, Jalen Reagor, Rambo, Trey Brown, Tyrese Robinson. They all kind of hung around him, gave him a great pitch about how they can come in, and obviously there's playing time. That seemed to be a common theme, that Oklahoma really hit hard the message of, hey, look, there's places for you to come in and play, which is, I think Josh has talked about this before. Even if you lose, there's opportunity, if you're a good salesman, to make a pitch. I mean, the recruiting isn't over once you lose. There's still things you can say, and it sounds like Oklahoma did a good job of that with Boyce.
I think the question for both of you, too, that talked to guys after the recruiting trips was, you talk to these guys and you talk to Jalen Reagor and guys that say that they're still in, say that they're still committed. And I think a question from the board would be, how do you read through what they're saying? Can you get a feel for if the guy's just telling you what you want to hear, or if he really does mean that he's still intact and going to move forward and stay with the Sooner Squad 17?
I'll let Josh give a longer answer since he's been doing this forever. But to me, all I can really go off of is what they've talked to me about before. And if I can feel like a difference in how they're talking to me and a change in that, that's kind of what I go off of. Josh probably has a much better answer.
Well, to me, I think something that's always interesting, and it's why I like to ask them about stuff like the game. If they come out and they're like, yeah, that didn't go well, blah, 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 then, that doesn't really answer the point you're trying to make. But if you get a guy that's like, well, a play here, a play there, they talk like they're a part of the team. They're defending their guys, their teammates, whatever you want to say. That to me usually is a kind of a clear indication of where they're, what they're thinking. And you got that from several guys this week, where they were kind of saying, they couldn't get lined up right. They were making some mental mistakes, and it didn't feel like a indictment of OU. It was just, hey, if they'll clean those things up, OU's going to be fine. And that's kind of the way they were looking at it. As to where you got some guys that were like, man, they just got blasted. Okay. And it's not that either are untrue. It's just, and it's the same for the people that are listening to us. They may think some of the same things we say, but we're going to say them more directly because we're not fans. We're not here to kind of skew it to a crimson-colored lens. We're just going to talk about what we see, and recruits are the same way. The guys who are on board or, kind of think that's the direction they're going, they'll usually come up with a defense, while guys that are, more on the fence are going to find ways to, kind of, I guess not going to find ways. They're just going to be more distant from the message.
You know what's interesting is, and what's different, there's a lot of things that are different about recruiting than when Josh and I were first starting, back in the 2000s. You could get kids on the phone then easy. Yeah. You could call and they'd pick up and you talk to them and do a story. Now, you'd spend more time, I'm sure, DMing kids than you do talking to them directly. And that's why we go out to so many games, see kids in person. It gives you an opportunity to know them. But, Josh, you might think this is kind of interesting, and I didn't think about it until you just started talking about it. But when we have our rivals camps, a lot of these kids go to them. Most of the kids in the Sooner Squad 17 class were at one of those. We make a big deal, to tell these kids, hey, let us tell your story. This is a camp. You got all this cool stuff. All we really want out of this is just to talk to you, just to know you, just to be able to tell your story when it comes to who you're going to sign with in college. And I think it helps us out a lot because kids realize, oh, well, there's guys doing this for OU. There's guys doing this for Texas Tech, for Texas. And they're really just interested in whether I'm going to go to college at the school they cover. Not so much are they, we're not fans. We're not out there talking to them like, oh, you really should go to OU. I mean, because this will, they don't have this or this and they really need you. And so when I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying to be recruiting reporters, and that's what they do. They feel like they have to suck up to kids. And so that's when you
call everybody great.
Yeah, that's when you get into a position where that kid's like, well, this guy wants to hear things a certain way, so I better tell it to him that way.
That makes sense.
I've said it before, literally almost every conversation I've had in about 15 years of doing this, the first time I talk to a kid, I'll go over with them, look, man, I don't care where you go. I'm not going to tell you, and I get kids every day. Well, what do you think about this school? What do you think about that school? Man, I'm not getting into it. That's not my place. And I think that's the difference that you see with some guy, like you said, Carey. I mean, if a guy believes that I want him to go to Oklahoma or want him to go to Texas or wherever, they're going to be more inclined to answer in a certain and specific way. If they realize that it doesn't matter to me, man, I just want to know what's going on with you. If you tell me you hate OU and never want to step foot within, Oklahoma State lines ever again, cool. That's your story, man. That's fine with me. So I think that's why we work so hard at this, and people don't, people want us to be fans sometimes. I get people on Twitter all the time like, oh, tell him this, I'll never do that. I'll joke about it, but I'm never going to do it because it means a lot to me that these guys can trust me, that I'm not going to put their stories out in a specific light that makes OU look good or presents things that are just not true.
And you know what? It allows you and allows us, if things do start going bad, we're not wishful thinking like it's not going on, something's not up. If something's up, we want to report something's up. We want to be accurate in portraying what's happening with this kid's recruitment. It's not the default, oh, it's nothing to worry about. While, on the other hand, the kid's probably on campus somewhere else.
Yeah, when it actually is.
Visit. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, 2 or 3, guys, there's 2 or 3 guys every year, and you guys know it because you hear me talk about it, that I literally just burn out on because I get so many questions like, is OU really in on this guy? No, they're not. I don't care if he came for a visit. John Houston's the one that everybody loves to talk about. And it's a perfect example. OU was never, ever going to get John Houston. That was never going to happen. But there were people like, I don't know, keep an eye on. No, I'm not pushing that agenda. That's bull, and it's not right. And, the kid did what everybody in the world knew he was going to do. He stayed in the Pac-12. So it's just, like I said, people, it's one of those things where I certainly understand when people are like, oh, you're spinning the thing. This is a negative weekend. It wasn't. Like, everybody I talked to, with a few exceptions, was pretty positive about the way things went. Now, could it have gone better? Absolutely. There's no question.
They could have
But just
won,
because things
They
weren't as bad as they could have been worse.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you get beat 45-24 on your home field, I'll say one thing that probably helped them, which was, and people were like arguing with me about it, and I didn't think there was any question that fans stayed later in that game than they had any right to. I mean, like, I'm saying I wouldn't have blamed one single fan for leaving that game before the third quarter was over. But people stayed. It was, and people are like, oh, look at the seats in the south end. So, yeah, those are the club people. They're up drinking beer, probably watching other games that are more interesting because they paid $10,000 to have those seats, and they're sure as hell not going to sit through this.
You
when
guys
they got
hear the
beer.
same crap I do. There's always people kind of around the program that say, oh, the fans leave so early and the students are usually gone by halftime. I'm like, I don't care. There's no way. If anybody brought their A game last weekend, it was the fans. Like, and I know we bag on fans a lot sometimes on here.
Well,
but
not a lot.
They did their part. They did what they needed to do, and it didn't. The field was the problem, not the stands.
I think it's always funny too that the people that bitch and complain about people leaving the stands are usually complaining from their living room.
Yeah.
Nut up and buy a ticket if you want to bitch about it.
All right, there's Eddie's.
Did he just turn red?
Yeah, he really got upset there.
I need a punching bag in here. It's going to get ugly.
Okay, so anything else that I mean, here's the thing. Like, okay, Marvin Wilson, I want to talk about him real quick. Do we just wait and find out that OU will probably start putting out offers if it really has gone south with him?
I kind of think so. Like, I expect Oklahoma to take a look at a couple other guys.
Because I mean, to be honest, let me just throw this out there real quick, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. The problem I had with the whole thing in the first place was it Krabby's article? Did he write that article?
Yeah, yeah.
But look, he has great sources.
He does.
I hated that everybody jumped off of a ledge because a rival coach said OU's out of it. Like, well, sure, a rival coach is going to say OU, and they may be, but come on, a rival coach. I mean, if it's a high school coach in Texas, I think that has a little bit more substance behind it. But
well,
what's a rival coach going to say? Yeah, they're still in it. It's a real good chance too.
Because it's not just about Marvin. Like, if that coach comes out and says, yeah, maybe it didn't go the way OU wanted it to, but they've still got a chance. Well, then all these other guys that want to play with Marvin are suddenly still as interested, more interested, however you want to term that, in Oklahoma. That gives Oklahoma some bounce even after a tough weekend. If that guy comes out and says it, and even if one out of those 10 recruits I'm talking about take that report seriously, well, that's one guy OU has a tougher job landing now because he thinks he's not going to get to play with Marvin, and he knows Marvin's a great player. So that all comes into it. I think there are some interesting circumstances around Marvin's visit this weekend. He actually didn't play in his game last Friday night. Had kind of an injury. I think he's going to end up missing a few weeks. I think there was some, for Marvin's part, I think he's a little down about that, and I think there is some that may have carried into the weekend. That may have carried into the visit, and it may not have helped Oklahoma's cause anyway. So, like I said, I think everybody's overreacting a little bit. I don't think Oklahoma's out. I think that's silly. He's got a really good relationship with Calvin Thibodeau. But at the same time, there's no question that Oklahoma didn't help themselves last weekend. They really – we talked about it in the scoop. We talked about it in the podcast last week. I thought Oklahoma had a chance to be his number one school if they put on a big show last weekend, won that game, and kind of got themselves back on track toward the playoff. Now, that's all off the table. We know that. But – I do think Oklahoma has a puncher's chance in this. They really do, because if you look at the two other schools that I've been talking about for a while, Texas and Florida State,
yep.
You think he's excited about what they did on the field last weekend?
God,
Texas looked worse than OU defensively.
Florida State got run out of everyone.
the state.
Yeah. By the way, sidebar, Josh, I think I know what the story is, but give me the worst official visit, night out after the game story that you remember.
Oh,
I mean, there have been people that have been like left.
Who was it that was left a couple years ago?
It was several years.
It was like
ago.
I was
it might
just
have been
walking
like
around
10
the
years
Switzer
ago.
Center.
About now, I mean,
I talked to Daryl Simpson last year, who said he got left at I think it was I can't remember which game it was, but he got left at a game and ended up going to Kendall's by himself. And
but didn't somebody get left at like Paul's Valley one time to that place they were going when somebody got shot eventually out there?
Oh yeah. I was gonna go with the guy that got punched at the fraternity party a long time ago, like not long after I was.
Oh, I
in
forgot
school.
about that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
was a
there
good
was
one,
that
too.
whole deal, and I can't remember who that was now off the top of my head, but there have been several less than stellar visits. And it's funny because you'll get some guys that are real honest about it, and then some guys are like, "Oh yeah, it just didn't go real good."
Yeah.
Like you can tell in their voice, like there's a story you're not getting that was bad. But yeah, the Paul's Valley thing, and I can't remember what that was, but there was something like that. But it couldn't have been Paul's Valley though, because I mean,
It was like Purcell or something like it was.
Yeah.
You were like, why the hell are you going? Or Davis or something like. Somebody got like hit in the leg with a bullet ricochet or something, and they actually missed some time. I wish I could remember who the hell that was.
That was just
it wasn't
down on
Clint
Lindsay,
Ingram,
wasn't
was
it?
it?
I thought that was just down on the East Lindsay.
No, it was somewhere in a small town in Oklahoma.
Did you say Keenan Clayton?
No, I said Mark Clayton or Clint Ingram.
That could be okay. Yeah. For some reason, Clayton sounded, but no, I think you're right. Ingram sounds more correct.
I just saw him in Houston too. I wish I would have remembered that story then.
But yeah, like I said, I would go with the guy that got decked at the fraternity, but like it ended up being a whole kind of brawl.
Wasn't it an
right.
offensive lineman too?
Yeah. It was somebody because you were like, he didn't hit him back. Like you were kind of thinking like that dude should have done some work. Maybe he didn't need to be recruited anyway. So
He must have grabbed some guy's girlfriend's ass or something.
Like in Superbad?
Maybe it was a test. They were seeing how tough he was. Like, I don't know about this guy.
Yeah,
Send a walk-on to punch him at a bar and see what he does.
Yeah, that's a great recruit. Because look, fraternities want great recruits. I mean, they're gonna show them a good time if they can. But yeah, you would have to be a monumental douche for someone to punch you.
Hey, quick question here: how many of you guys have been punched in the face?
Never.
See, it shouldn't be that hard not to get punched in the face. If you're getting,
I've taken plenty of baseballs right in the head though, and bats. I have so many scars on the top of my head. I've been in the emergency room literally 6 or 7 times.
See, I've never even done
with
that.
head injuries.
I've never really been in a fight. The only fight that I've been in, I kicked a guy in the head while he was down.
God. Was this in New Orleans?
No, it was in Brixton Square in Oklahoma City.
Well, yeah.
Why was he down?
He got in a fight with some of my buddies, and
you kicked him.
Beat him up, and he was down. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll kick him. Kicked him and then ran.
It's going to sound better than it is. I've been in a couple of fights, but I've never been hit in the head. Like that doesn't mean like I'm a bad guy or anything like that.
I grew up fighting with my brother. I have been hit in the head, by the way. I had a brother that was 13 months older than me. And
that just comes with the territory.
When we got into fights, I didn't want to hit him in the head. Like I thought that was over the line. Like we'd punch each other as hard as we could in the chest or the nuts or whatever. But he would. He didn't care. He was a bastard. He would hit me in the head.
That should be off limits.
I've seen a few rib boxing matches. I think that's okay if you stay in the torso.
Now we did what we called neophyte boxing when I was in high school, and I've boxed before. Growing up, going to like boys' club, we'd put on the gloves and go at it.
Yeah, we've done that.
I did the Hulk gloves before.
But we did this thing where we'd go. The neophytes were the guys that were joining the Letterman's Club for the first time. So you'd have neophyte boxing, and you'd put. We'd come up with the matchups. Like this guy's going to fight that guy.
Sounds like hazing.
Like it was. It really was. It was high school hazing. But if you had a wrestler that was your 98-pounder, you'd put him up against a cross country guy, and that was a little bit taller, that had some reach.
What a slap in the face to the 98-pounder wrestler that has to fight a cross country guy.
Well, but he couldn't get in there because of the long arms.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course, the cross country guys never would show up after that. So
Probably tells you everything
the
you need to know
wrestlers were
about
the only guys.
cross-country.
Yeah, the wrestlers were the only guys that would show up.
I wouldn't take
the football players.
I wouldn't take a 98-pound wrestler right now. That's one of the reasons I don't like getting into fights is you don't know who you're going up against, and wrestlers know what they're doing. They'll
Yeah.
put you on the ground in 2 seconds.
I would beat the shit out of a 98-pound wrestler right now.
Like a high school kid.
Oh, definitely.
We'll
a high
get you a
school
high
kid.
school kid to fight.
Can we get that done?
I'd prefer a middle schooler, but if I have to do a high schooler,
I want to watch
Our
that.
next podcast has to be a live
Yes,
broadcast
please.
of Eddie brawling a 98.
if we can figure it out and do it from the Hefner B wrestling tournament where I am 1-2, you know what I'm talking about, Josh?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's like the JV of the JV wrestling tournaments.
See, I mean, and let's see, what is the smallest in high school? Is it 119?
Oh,
Or is there
man.
even one below that?
I honestly, I feel like
119's old. Like that was what it was when I was in school.
I think when I was in
But
school, it was like 108 was the lowest.
See, I think
Yeah.
there's like it's right around 100.
Yeah, I want to say there was
in
like a
high school.
108 or something, but like almost half the teams had to forfeit it because there wasn't anybody small enough to do it.
Those guys are scrappy.
All right. I don't know how we get the podcast back on track after that discussion.
It doesn't matter. Eddie's going to fight a 120-pound high school kid.
Oh, I got a good segue. Speaking of a team that had no fight in them this weekend, Carey.
Ba-dum-tsh.
I don't have my hands on the buttons and stuff. There we go. Yes, the Sooners did not play well, and it's brought up a lot of questions. And I don't know, how would you guys describe the board, the Crimson Corner, last 4 days?
I feel like it is the final. It's like they were standing. They've been in a 10-round boxing match, and this was the final blow. It's just like reality has hit.
A lot of people have been knocked out.
Yeah, and reality has hit, and I think for the most part, I almost felt like Bob was the same way after the game Saturday night.
Yeah.
It's a very
Mike even more so.
Yeah, it's a very defeating, a very eye-opening loss in that
You got dominated.
if you want to be where Ohio State is, they're very far off from that right now.
And I got to admit, I think there's no doubt the seeds for this discontent right now were planted after the Clemson loss last year, because everybody started talking about, it's obvious OU just isn't as physical or as strong as the better teams in the country. And that was kind of one of those things you could kind of dismiss and be like, yeah, but they didn't have Charles Walker and this and this and that. But when it came down to it, you play another premier team in Ohio State, and you can't tackle on defense. You get sacked for 13 yards on the 3-yard line. I mean, it looked a lot like the same problems that they had against Clemson.
Yeah, what's the stage of grief after denial?
There's 5 stages.
Whatever that one is what it felt like.
Anger, denial, acceptance.
Somewhere between denial and it's anger and acceptance put together, and the denial's completely gone now. I was going
to say apathy. Like they just you compare this to 5 or 6 years ago when OU would lose a game, that it's not the same. Like it feels like expected or something. I don't know, Joe. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll let you go, but apathy is what came to my mind.
Yeah, I was talking to Eddie after Monday or after Tuesday. I guess we were talking to the offense, and I said that was like talking to a bunch of zombies, right? I mean, they were all saying the right things, but all like expression and emotion was gone, and it's kind of the same things carried over through the fans. It just feels like this somber tone of, oh, okay, I guess this is it again. We're back to being whatever this is, back to being just hoping we win a Big 12 championship.
There's only one Bubba Moses.
If there could
Thank you,
just be a
Bubba.
Bubba Moses now.
They need one. That's why I feel like, driving home after the game Saturday night, I was listening to the wrap-up show with you and JD, Carey, and it almost feels like there just isn't that fear of being embarrassed anymore. There's like, I feel like in the early 2000s, you think about those great Stoops teams, there was like a fear of being embarrassed, and it's happened so often in the last 4 or 5 years that I don't know. I don't feel like there is that fear of going out and disappointing Bob as much as there is just going out and almost going through the motions. I don't know if that's the best way to put it.
It's a different it's a different time, and I think I'd hate to say that OU's got off track, but, and Josh, you know this, I mean, all the stuff that people used to complain about, and I find this funny. I mean, it's so ironic, and I think even mentioned something on the board about it, because someone was saying basically, Schmitty needs to focus on players getting stronger and more powerful, and it used to be just the opposite. It used to be, remember, was it Sooner 55 that was always banging the drum about Schmitty's out of touch with today's training age. It needs to be more about agility and quickness,
flexibility.
And flexibility, and all he cares about is making guys big and strong. And so now it's switched completely back the other way, just like Mike Stoops was the savior when he came in here, and now we have to get rid of him, and Brent Venables was the problem when he was here, and now we kill to have Brent Venables back. It's just like, good God, the flip-flopping is at an all-time high. I mean, the only thing that people aren't flip-flopping on is that Tim Kish is the fall guy for a lot of people. It always has been.
Scrambling for excuses, basically.
And Tim Kish has 3 inside linebackers that are playing pretty good football. Like, I don't think any of them are stars, but they're playing okay. They're
they're not the problem.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah. That's the least of OU's issues on defense right now.
Yeah, I mean, Stoops came in, and I remember in 99, 2000, his main mantra was no excuses, and it almost feels like that has, at some point over the last 17 years, that's dissipated. It's not there anymore. There are lots of excuses. Even Monday, Bob Stoops says he's not going to let young guys talk to the media anymore. Like that feels like an excuse to me. That feels like he's throwing something out there as a problem to somehow justify part of the reason they lost so big, which is ridiculous.
Well, I want to talk about some of what we talked with the players and coaches with this week. And just to refresh your memory, I think Josh is having a hard time hearing this stuff. So I might kind of over-explain it just a little bit. But you heard Mike Stoops unleash the S-bomb earlier. Here's Bob Stoops right after the game when I asked him about leadership and if he wanted to admit now that it basically was sorely lacking. Bob, how much of that is just losing some of the leadership now that you look back at it? I mean,
it's fair to say the leadership, isn't close to what it was a year ago, and that's on me. That I'm in front of the program. I got to do a better job, and I've got to do a better job developing players to be that.
And I think it's kind of sparked a discussion too. And right there, you hear Bob. I mean, that's you don't often hear Bob come back and admit something when he has fought hard to basically dismiss your questions. And we asked him about that a lot in the spring. Because, we'd be out there at practice at the end of it, and it was so just, whisper quiet compared to what we were used to being around practice. You didn't hear anybody yelling. You didn't see anybody getting after anybody on the field. And I could just tell, this looks like an issue.
Where do you get your leadership from, though? I mean, you can't just go up to Stephen Parker and Jordan Evans.
It has to be your star players.
But they don't strike me as guys that are just going to get in people's asses like
P-Ryan's
like
not,
Stryker
no.
was,
Jordan
like
Evans
Stryker
not.
would, or
Yeah.
like Charles Tapper would. And even Charles Tapper, I mean, you saw him kind of evolve into a guy that became a vocal guy. But how do you take that next step? How do you create that when you don't have something like that? And I think that Baker is the type of guy that does that. But I think that he also is a guy that he jokes around and cuts up so much that he's free, kind of I don't know if free flowing would be the best way to put it, but he's such a lighthearted guy that I don't think that when he busts somebody's ass, I think it's a little bit different when a guy like Eric Stryker did a year ago, I guess is the best way to put it.
And you can't be something you're not. I mean, we've all been in locker rooms. We've probably seen guys try to be leaders, and you just look at them and they'll start yelling. You say, no, I'm not listening to that guy. I mean, you have to be in you. It has to be the right guy to step up and do it. And I don't know who that would be for the Oklahoma team. I guess if Jordan Evans maybe had that in him, but it still doesn't feel natural to a guy like that. I don't know who the guy would be.
Well, I think one of the bigger problems is guys may not be. I mean, like Samaje Perine, no matter how well he plays, he's never going to be a vocal guy. That's just not. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Samaje Perine doesn't watch football.
He watches.
He
Cops.
doesn't like talking about football. He's really good at playing football. He's like one of the weirdest dudes. Like, he knows he was blessed. And I don't know if he likes playing football or if he's just playing football because he's really good at it and he knows, he's going to have a future playing in NFL.
It's a fair.
I mean, I could see him being one of those guys that, he gets hurt in the NFL, plays a few years, and then just says, you know what, this is not for me. I'm gonna go hunting and fishing.
He'd be very happy doing something else.
Yeah. I don't think football, it definitely doesn't define him. But I just don't think he's ever going to be that guy he hasn't been that guy that dreams of growing up in a locker room and loves the camaraderie of guys. I mean, everybody describes him as just kind of strange. Like
Ricky Williams minus all the weed.
Yeah. Just with bows and arrows instead.
Yeah.
And, maybe he does, but he's never given that indication that, and it's probably because we don't really know who Samaje Perine is. I mean, we've talked to him before, but
I think he's a really nice guy. I mean, when he was at Big 12 Media Days, he was open and honest.
Yeah.
But
it's because he had to be.
He just doesn't care about talking to you about football. He doesn't want to talk about football.
And that's probably I don't want to say he's definitely not the reason they're 1-2.
No, but I'm just saying,
it's that era or that kind of that atmosphere in the locker room. I think that plays a part of it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: like Alabama, I'm sure they have guys that aren't vocal leaders, but once you've worked so hard and you become a guy that's making all the plays, people look to you. You take some ownership over that. They have guys that are capable. I think Mark Andrews is capable.
Yeah.
I think Dede Westbrook is capable.
Orlando
Brown, kind of. I mean, you hear stuff about him being
Not
kind
yet.
of a knucklehead.
Not yet.
I mean, just doing stupid stuff in practice, like getting in too many fights and stuff like that. So I think that hurts him. But Jonathan Alvarez is a quiet guy for as big as he is. I just don't think they have enough guys making enough plays to where people can look up to someone and say, okay, I need to do it like that guy. I need to be like him. He's doing this. I need to follow his lead.
Well, I think it also probably hurts, especially in the offensive line room. You don't have that Gabe Eichert, Ty Darlington guy anymore. That guy that is I'm not saying that they're not very smart, but I am saying that you don't have that guy that is very, very smart and will speak up for everybody.
And that if you don't know what you're doing, you can just look to him instantly and you'll know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And some of that leadership isn't showing up just on the field. I mean, Sterling Shepard's not out there making catches in double coverage anymore. He's not out there making great catches on the sideline for third downs that Baker Mayfield can trust anymore. There's not Zach Sanchez forcing throws to come Jordan Thomas's way that he can turn the ball over back to the offense. There aren't guys, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, when there's not guys out there making plays. Who's out there making a play? It's just not happening on the field.
There's been quite a discussion, and I'll tell you where I lean after this, but I want to play you Stephen Parker and Baker Mayfield, who were posed questions this week about, does this team have enough talent? Do you feel that way? I mean, do you feel like you have the talent?
The talent is there. Offensively, defensively, on both sides of the ball, the talent is there. It's really just about us executing and basically doing what we were capable of doing.
Talent's there. I mean, if you look at the stats, we're averaging more yards per play than we did all of last year, and we've played some good teams so far, and so that's very promising. I mean, Houston, we averaged 11 yards per play. That's pretty good, and right now our full average is 7 yards throughout 3 games, and we've played. 2 really good teams, and so the talent's there, and it's promising what we're capable of. It's just, like I said, the little things. If we can put it all together, look out.
Look, and I'm going to say this, Josh, I'll direct this to you. Nobody can say the talent's not there. They can't be honest. The coaches can't be honest, because if they say we don't have enough talent, then it's basically ripping their own players who they've been responsible for recruiting. And the players, you're just never going to hear them say that. I mean, they believe in themselves. They're at this level for a reason. I do think that talent is talent's obviously lacking, especially there's not enough pass rushers in this program. It's obvious there's not enough corners in this program, cover guys in this program. There's not enough receivers in this program.
It was shocking when I read your story yesterday, Carey, that OU is 77th in the country right now in sacks. That's something that I did not think. I mean, there's a lot of things that we didn't think was going to turn out like it has through the first 3 games, but not being able to get after the quarterback is something that I thought that they were going to maybe be able to do a little bit this year, especially with the defensive tackles that they were bringing back. Charles Walker's been virtually non-existent. Matt Romar has been good, but he obviously didn't play against Ohio State. Jordan Wade is just, Mike Stoops said it yesterday. He's a really good player, but he just gets the job done. He's not doing anything just overly great.
By the way, Mike did say yesterday that Romar wouldn't be back to practice this week at all. So it sounds like it's more than just nicked up.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I also think Baker's selectively choosing some stats here. I mean, to say that they're averaging more yards per play than they did at any time a year ago is, well, technically true because they're averaging 6.9 yards per play. They averaged 7.9 against Louisiana Monroe alone, and a lot of those averages come from they have 7 plays of 30 yards or more just from Joe Mixon and Mark Andrews. And Joe Mixon got less than 10 carries against Ohio State. So your guys that are giving you the yards, if you're not feeding them the ball, maybe that's part of the reason why your offense isn't moving the way it has. And D.D. Westbrook's averaging like 7 yards a catch. He was supposed to be a downfield threat. It's just, you can say that you're close and that you're almost there, but it feels almost like it's a little misleading. I don't think they're as close as they think they are.
You cannot get stats past Joe Duvall.
Jeez, oh man, he's a guy now.
What's the most disappointing aspect, I guess, would be the best way to put it? Has it been the offense? Because for me, as bad as the
defense against Ohio State is the worst thing the worst travesty of the season so far.
Just the way that they got beat up. I mean, it seemed like every other play there was a guy getting...
4 touchdowns for the Brown guy. I mean, 4 touchdowns, 4th and 1. What was that, a 36-yard touchdown run?
Yeah.
And the Brown touchdown that was the most egregious on OU's end
was Jordan Thomas.
So I don't know what you do there. I do know what you do if you say, I don't know how we're going to defend teams that try to make Will Johnson an outside linebacker. Well, you listed him as an outside linebacker.
By the way, glad you brought that up because I asked Mike Stoops this week about Parrish Cobb and his potential still going forward. And Mike Stoops basically turned the subject to Will Johnson and how he screwed things up.
Mike Parrish, obviously a guy that's very talented. For you to put him in those situations, how much better can he get?
He can get a lot better. I mean, he's just scratching the surface, and we got a lot of players like that. And like I said, I think our biggest, more concern to me is somewhat our inexperience at linebacker, and it showed the other night in a game. And I've put Will in some tough situations, and our inexperience at Sam has played a factor in that, and that's my fault that we don't have a guy that we can play big. We needed to play big the other day, and we didn't, and that's not their fault. That's our fault. So they put him in a situation where he had to play an outside linebacker, and we should have had foresight in that and played a different way.
And I said this morning on my radio show. I really think, and people are going to freak out when they hear that, and they're going to say, "Well, that's your damn fault. You should have been ready. Why weren't you ready?" I think they got lulled into a false sense of security because they held Houston to 80 rushing yards, and they thought, "Oh, well, this lineup, it's able to do that against Houston against the same offense." I just don't think that they thought that they needed to do that coming into this game, which is a huge mistake. Mike just admitted it right there.
It's pretty much a gamble that they took that they lost very, very badly. But how does that happen? How do you not have guys on the outside ready? I mean,
how do you not at least try Capri Doucette in that situation?
Exactly.
Ricky DeBerry has 50 pounds on Will Johnson, and he plays outside linebacker.
Yeah.
I mean, you have people there. He acted like he had nobody there to put in. You chose to use the 50-pound lighter guy. Yeah, that was your decision. You got guys that weigh more and are bigger. That was Mike Stoops' call.
It's almost like they see these guys every day, obviously, in practice. They see them screw up during practice, and then their trust is just gone from them, and they can't put them out there on Saturdays because they haven't seen it in practice. Well, my argument against that would be, it's obviously not working one way. You might as well try something else. And I don't know, is that just them being stubborn, or is it being just that they truly don't think that they have anybody that they can put out there, and they're putting the best guy out there?
That's the perfect point, Eddie, to me, I understand if you feel like in everything that you want to do, Will Johnson's a better player than Ricky DeBerry. Okay, on the whole, maybe that's correct. But with the way Ohio State was attacking you, you needed more size on the edge. Like, that's not even, I don't even know how that fell into question. Why wouldn't you run him out there when it was clear that what you were doing wasn't working? They were just, and I know it's a term that OU fans love, but they were out leveraging Oklahoma to the side every time. And especially when you're talking about guys that are shooting inside. That first touchdown, Will Johnson comes diving inside, and it just lets Curtis Samuel run to the outside. And a guy with his speed, that should have been point A. Whatever else you do, funnel him back to the middle. Like, keep him inside at all cost. And Oklahoma just gave him the edge, and he was going to outrun anybody. I don't care if Ahmad Thomas and Stephen Parker had 5 steps. They're not going to catch that guy.
Well, and the other thing is, Parrish Cobb has got to look. I think he's probably the guy moving forward still, unless they see something out of Micaiah Quick. But as long as you're having that problem at the corner, somebody was asking me the other day about, Alabama, they throw some underneath coverage in there to help out, when they're getting burnt. That's a wrinkle. That's not a base defense. Like, that's kind of like you blitz. You don't blitz Ahmad Thomas every time. You blitz him every once in a while. He got a sack the other night. If you don't have a defense with 2 cover corners, not even for the Big 12, you got to have 3 in the Big 12. If you don't have 2 cover corners in your defense, you've lost before you've even started.
Yeah.
Especially if you can't get to the quarterback.
There's no scheme that's going to allow you to cover up for a guy that can't cover a receiver. Another team. You have to have 2 guys that can cover the best receiver on the other team, or you're in trouble.
I think part of the frustration from Oklahoma fans is the tradition of Mike Stoops in the second tenured OU has been that he can stop one thing, but not the other. You stop the pass against West Virginia, then Tavon Austin runs for 300 yards against you. You stop the run, then you have one of the worst pass defenses in the country. And in this game, it appeared they weren't geared up to stop anything. And against Houston, they at least stopped the quarterback run game and basically contained Catalan in the regular running game. But in this game, Ohio State ran over Oklahoma. Noah Brown had 4 touchdowns when he didn't have more than 2 in a game, 2 catches, period, in a game, I think, before that night. So they were beat through the air and on the ground, and I think that really just makes Oklahoma fans angry.
You know what's crazy? I mean, every time that Tavon Austin game comes up,
it's just how bad he sucks in the NFL now.
No, is that OU won that game.
Yeah,
50-49.
And it's like, it gets talked about like it's the worst thing that's ever happened to OU football. They won the game.
Is that Landry Jones?
6 touchdowns.
And now the imprisoned Devin Thomas also committed to Oklahoma that day.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You remember that night? Yeah, that night. Is he in prison now?
I believe he is.
I believe he is.
Like 12 years or something?
I think he got 10, maybe.
Is that the top guy of, man, what happened to him? When you saw him as a sophomore and think about where he is now, is that the guy of just what happened to him?
His life absolutely went downhill after fumbling against Tulsa Union. Broken Arrow had the state championship within their grasp. He fumbles, Union picks it up, runs it in, ends up winning the game in the 4th quarter, and I don't know. That was a bad the start of the downturn, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Devin
Saw it happen in high school.
Yeah.
Like you could watch, like his junior year, he was nowhere near the player he was as a sophomore.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, he was our sophomore of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I think we all 3 went down there and watched it. And there was a running back starting in front of him. Was it Cameron something?
Cameron Wren.
Cameron Wren.
He's a good player.
And he was a really nice player. But then as the season went along, you're like, oh, he's no Devin Thomas.
Yeah.
But I will say this, Devin Thomas, because of him, I will never have a problem if Kel Gundy gets fired. Because our own Josh McCuistion had sent Kel Gundy a message one time after he saw him behaving like a brat after a game when he was.
I'm going to get blocked for this even coming up.
Was this still? You might. That's fine. You should be able to live with it. I don't think he would block you. I think he needs you more than he would admit. But Josh just sent a message saying, "Hey, I saw some really bad behavior. You guys might want to pay attention to something with his kid. And Cale Gundy told Josh to mind his own business.
Good call, Josh.
Yeah, and Joe, funny enough, and wow, we kind of come full circle. It was a Norman North game. It was like basically the weekend before OU offered Jordan Evans.
What did he do? Did he just throw off all of his gear and throw a hissy and wouldn't be around the team or something?
Broken Arrow was trying to drive and tie the game, and I think it was state quarters or
is that when Jordan
semis.
Evans ran the kickoff back?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Evans just had a huge night. And of course for Broken Arrow, Jossie Akim had a huge night, but I don't want to go into that love affair right now.
Is he playing at all?
He's playing a little bit.
I don't know. I don't understand it. But anyway, to not totally divert. And he was just kind of walking along the sidelines. Broken Arrow has the ball. Coleman Key is trying to get Broken Arrow down the field. And he wasn't going to be part of the first group because, I mean, they've got to go like 80 yards in about a minute 12. And so he comes off, throws his helmet down, starts taking his shoulder pads off. Like he's not even like, I'm not going back in at all, period. And just is apart from the team and walks away from everything. And if you asked anybody at Broken Arrow in that era, they'd say, oh, no, he's a good kid, man. He'd made some dumb stuff, and you're like, everything is telling me that's not true. Like, everything is telling me this kid's got a problem. And then you see it, and now you look where it is. And, I mean, that's certainly not to say, oh, I knew all along. But it's just you can't ignore stuff like that. And like I said, I mean, it was something I just kind of was like, hey, here's a heads up. I saw this tonight. I know because I can't remember. It was another situation where OU was on a road trip. I knew there was no way they were there, that kind of thing. And so I had just sent out a little note, and it wasn't well received. I don't know how else to say that.
Hey, at least you didn't have to tell him, like, hey, Devin Thomas robbed the concession stand at halftime tonight.
Well, I couldn't confirm that report. I'd heard, but.
Okay, well, we're overtime. I think, this being a bye week, we'll come back and do a podcast again next week. I think we're probably done talking to anyone this week as far as OU goes. I don't know. Maybe I'll find something out today. Maybe Bob will talk to us. I don't know. We haven't heard that. But Monday, it'll all start back up again. And you guys know who's up next, right?
TCU's my problem.
It's Gary Patterson and TCU.
It's going to be a very, very interesting next 2 weeks
Baylor's
to see
not my
how.
problem. TCU's
God, I
my
love
problem.
you. I love you, Gary Patterson. That was the best quote
answer.
of Big 12 Media Days.
That's a great answer.
It's going to be interesting though, just to see how everything goes over these next 2 weeks, because the reality of Oklahoma being 1-4. Do I really think that could happen? Maybe. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. But I say that questioning myself. So I don't know. It's going to be. I'm excited for the next 2 weeks after this bye week.
What do you guys think is going to happen this weekend with Baylor and Oklahoma State? Josh, you go first.
I'll probably take Oklahoma State. I think everybody kind of got crazy with that Central Michigan game, and I guess I understand. People have fallen asleep. Like, Baylor is the exact thing that I hate about the rankings. Like, I don't hate the preseason rankings. I hate that if you keep winning, you just move up. Like, arbitrarily, it doesn't matter what you did. They've looked wildly mediocre against SMU and Rice, and yet they keep climbing the polls because other teams lose. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't hold it against a team if they lose to a good team. Like, if you put Ole Miss and Baylor on the same field, I'd take Ole Miss by 2 touchdowns.
They won by 28 over Rice? What was it, 38-10?
Yeah, 38-10.
They were at, I think it was 21-14 with SMU or 17-10 or something like that, with SMU down at their 4-yard line, and they threw an interception. The game kind of came apart for SMU. But SMU should not be on the field at all with a top 15 team. And so I like Oklahoma State. I think they'll go up and down the field. And I just think they'll find a few more stops. I think Baylor's bad on defense.
Mason Rudolph was really bad in their first 2 games.
He's been, outside of the Southeast Louisiana game.
He finally got it figured out against Pitt. I don't know if it was competition level that straightened him up, but, James Washington had, 300 yards almost receiving?
Mm-hmm.
3 touchdowns in that game?
Something like that. He was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week.
He got a lot of national awards last week, too.
Or was it national?
Well, he was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week, but I know he was
Okay.
on some national list that I got.
I don't know. I don't understand.
But their run game stinks still.
OSU.
They got nothing.
And that's where
Terrible.
That's where Baylor's defense is the weakest. Is that you can run all over Baylor. Rice ran for 230 or something against Baylor, but I think they only threw for like 30 yards. But I don't know. I don't know how you can have any confidence one way or the other with this game. With the way Mason Rudolph played against Central Michigan and how Oklahoma State played and ended that game, how do you have? And then Baylor. Their offense has looked. Their stats have put almost like very OU-esque, in that they put up some numbers. They've looked okay, but the points haven't shown up. So I don't know if that's Art Briles or what.
I'm going to go with Baylor just because it has nothing to do with what I've seen on the field so far. I just think that we all want Baylor to suck because of all the horrible things that happened there. And I think is the perception of Baylor is that we've all pronounced that program is done. But really, all they lost was one recruiting class that's not going to affect them until next year and the year after that. They still are pretty much Baylor, except that they have one really good receiver right now in Katie Cannon.
and maybe a little more tone deaf.
They're very tone deaf, yeah.
Art Briles is a great man, Eddie. Just ask anybody.
Never done anything wrong in his life.
Yeah.
Jason King, he'll confirm.
I don't want to get in that war.
He's a loser.
I'm already going to have a call from Cale Gundy, as it is, probably.
Well, I mean, if Jason King calls you, you just forward it to me.
Jason
and I'll
King
talk to him.
attacked me on Twitter about Joe Mixon just because I said, dude, why don't you step back? Just because we knew Jason King worked for Yahoo Sports as the basketball. I would see him in Kansas City every year. I thought he was normal.
And we quickly found out that he was not.
I mean, wow. I didn't realize he was a Baylor alum, but he is, he's out there.
Well, he's still talking about it. Like you
was
you
fighting with
almost get it
Lindsey
if it's
Schnell.
to you, Carey, because
Yeah.
it's an OU thing. But he's talking about it on Twitter to the Lindsey Snell girl that was at the press conference thing last year. Like how nobody asked tough questions to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon doesn't talk to anybody. Like I don't know how you're supposed to ask those questions.
Yeah, Joe Mixon has lawyers that don't want him to talk, that OU can't let him talk because of his lawyers. And they're trying to work through that. But they haven't to this point, so.
The one thing
The
about
only reason he talked at the Orange Bowl is because they were going to get fined if he didn't. They told that was the only time they told their lawyers, shove it. We've got to do this. We're not paying the fine. So anyway.
Gosh.
Yeah, but I don't want to get.
the one thing I don't understand about the Baylor Oklahoma State game this weekend, I'm trying to look up the line right now. Baylor opened at like a 10.5 point favorite.
Did they?
And it got bet down a little bit. I think it's at like 9.5. I've been told. I don't pay attention that much to that kind of stuff. But it'll be interesting. I wouldn't touch the game. I think it's supposed to rain down in Waco.
Yeah, it is.
It's supposed to be really bad weather, and usually I go with the home team when that happens, even though that would go
Last time they were
completely
there,
against it.
It was raining. Is when they pulled Mason Rudolph out of red
Yeah.
shirt, and he played really, really
Played
well. in the
really
rain.
good.
Yeah.
They just didn't have it enough. I guess the last two times that it's rained down in Waco with Oklahoma teams, Baylor won and then OU won last year. But
OSU definitely has the better offense. It's just, is that Mason Rudolph, the best version of Mason Rudolph, going to show up?
yeah,
And is Baylor's defense maybe better than we're giving it credit for? Because they still have a lot of athletes on that side of the football.
is that the only interesting Big 12 game this weekend? I guess TCU plays Friday night. If Oklahoma fans want to watch them, they played in Dallas against SMU.
God, their schedule sucks.
Yeah, really bad.
They got that break from playing Minnesota, but they just went right back to playing rum-dums.
Yeah, I think it's, for the most part, I mean, really, it's not a good
I mean, they did play
weekend.
Arkansas, so I guess I'm...
Well, but, yeah.
It's the envy of Baylor's schedule.
Look,
Yeah.
Arkansas is a better program than Minnesota was. And they're better as a team right now than Minnesota was. They lost that game, though.
I'll definitely be cheering for Florida on Saturday. I like watching Tennessee suffer.
BYU, West Virginia. There's a game.
I would expect Florida would really take down Tennessee hard.
It's in Knoxville. Tennessee's given 6.5. It'll be.
Yeah, it was in the swamp last year, wasn't it?
That'll be really awesome. Yeah, because they had the
comeback, yeah.
4th and 14.
Tennessee will have the athletes. They should win that game by 20 points.
Wisconsin,
That's the fun-
Michigan
that's the
State,
fun
I
thing
guess,
with
will
Tennessee.
have good, big national implications. Georgia, Mississippi will be all right.
Okay, we got to wrap this thing up. That'll do it for this podcast. I want to remind everybody, go over to iTunes, give us a rating over there. We noticed some more people did that since our last show. Really appreciate you doing that. Helps us out just kind of with our own personal egos of being ranked. If you continue to give the updates, not based on this show, obviously, because it wasn't very good, but yeah, go over there and check it out. Give us a review. Tell us what you think of the show. We'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget, we'll have plenty of stuff coming over the bye weekend. I'm just going to be at home kind of working on stuff, so I'll get some more stories out, things like that. We got lots of video to get to you. Some you've already seen on the message boards as well. But I'll be around to try and play psychologist for some of you guys. I know I've been trying to get to the questions on the board as much as I could. I did kind of check out, I'll admit it, on Sunday after going to bed at like 5 a.m. Kind of slogged my way through that Sunday. But no, thanks to Josh McQuistion, who is back home in his studio. Here from our studio, Eddie Radosevich, Joe Duvall. I'm Carey Murdock, and we'll see you next time on another edition of the Unofficial 40.